My name is Zelara Evelynn, and the moment I realized my boss Cornelius Thatcher had been systematically destroying my career to cover up his theft, I felt something inside me crystallize into pure, calculated fury. It was 5 p.m. on a Friday when he dropped that thick manila folder on my desk with his signature smirk, announcing that I had until Monday morning to complete what should have been a 3-month comprehensive market analysis project. The way his wife Ophelia watched from the conference room, her predatory gaze fixed on me through the glass partition, should have been my first warning. But I was too busy calculating the impossibility of what he was asking, too focused on the mathematical certainty of my failure, to understand that failure was exactly what they wanted. You see, Cornelius had perfected the art of weaponizing deadlines. Give an employee an impossible task, watch them scramble and break, then use their inevitable failure as justification for termination. Clean, efficient, and completely legal. What I didn't know yet was that he'd done this exact thing to 7 other people in the past 2 years. Each termination conveniently timed right after major client payments had mysteriously vanished from company accounts. Before I reveal how I turned his own trap into his complete annihilation, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments what you would have done in my situation? Because what I'm about to share with you changed everything I thought I knew about justice, and you need to hear how someone can transform desperation into the most beautiful revenge. Also, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and click that notification bell, because stories like this don't come around often. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. That Friday evening, as I sat alone in the office building's harsh lighting, staring at the project requirements that would normally take a full team months to complete, I felt the familiar weight of professional doom settling over me. Cornelius had been escalating these impossible assignments for weeks now, each one more unreasonable than the last. The pattern was becoming clear: sudden project reassignments, mysterious disappearances of my completed work, and increasingly impossible deadlines that seemed designed to break me. But something had shifted in me during those months of systematic torment, where once I might have panicked, now I felt a strange clarity. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was finally recognizing the game being played. But instead of diving headfirst into the impossible market analysis, I found myself questioning everything. Why this project? Why now? Why was Ophelia, who'd only been hired as HR director 3 weeks ago, suddenly so interested in my performance metrics? I started my weekend work not with spreadsheets and market research, but with something far more dangerous: curiosity about the company's financial patterns. What I discovered in those first few hours of digging through internal systems would have made a forensic accountant weep with appreciation. Cornelius Thatcher was a master craftsman of corporate theft, and I was about to become his greatest mistake. The beauty of his scheme was its elegant simplicity. Large client payments would arrive, get deposited into the company's main account, then systematically transferred to a secondary account he controlled. He'd then manufacture delays, blame employees for missed deliverables, and use their failures to justify termination before anyone could trace the missing funds back to him. The terminated employees would leave thinking they'd simply failed at their jobs, never realizing they'd been scapegoats for embezzlement. I spent Saturday morning creating a timeline. Jennifer Ashworth terminated 6 months ago for failure to deliver the Morrison account deliverables. The Morrison payment, $230,000, deposited and transferred the day before her termination. Bradley Quinton, fired for inadequate performance on the Henderson project. Henderson payment, $185,000, vanished 24 hours before Bradley's dismissal. 7 employees, 7 major client payments, 7 perfectly timed failures that allowed Cornelius to clean house while pocketing nearly $2 million over 2 years. By Saturday evening, I understood with absolute clarity that I wasn't being set up to fail at a market analysis. I was being positioned as scapegoat number 8, probably to cover whatever client payment was about to hit our accounts on Monday. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to complete his impossible project, I would give Cornelius exactly what he'd asked for: a comprehensive analysis, just not the kind he was expecting. Sunday became the most productive day of my professional life. I built something magnificent: something that would make the C-suite understand exactly how much money they'd been hemorrhaging while Cornelius played his elaborate shell game. I structured it as the ultimate efficiency solution, a presentation that would trace every dollar, every convenient firing, every suspicious timing that had cost the company not just stolen funds, but wrongful termination lawsuits waiting to happen. The genius of it was using his own format against him. He demanded a market analysis presentation for Monday morning's executive meeting to be delivered in front of the entire C-suite and recorded for company archives. He'd wanted witnesses to my failure. Instead, he was about to get witnesses to his destruction. Monday morning arrived with that particular clarity that comes before a storm. I walked into the building carrying my laptop bag, feeling the weight of what I was about to unleash. The conference room was already full when I arrived. The entire C-suite, several department heads, and positioned right at the head of the table like royalty, Cornelius and Ophelia Thatcher. Ophelia's presence finally made perfect sense. She wasn't just his wife, she was his insurance policy. As HR director, she could manipulate performance reviews, alter documentation, and ensure that terminated employees left quietly, without asking uncomfortable questions about timing or finances. Zelara, Cornelius announced with that theatrical concern he'd perfected, I hope you've prepared something substantial. As you know, we have some serious decisions to make about departmental efficiency. The threat was barely veiled. Present your failure, accept your termination gracefully, and let us continue our lucrative little operation. I connected my laptop to the main display, watching as the title slide appeared, Maximizing Profit Margins Through Strategic Fraud Elimination, a comprehensive financial analysis. The room's energy shifted immediately. This wasn't the market analysis they'd expected. Cornelius's expression flickered between confusion and growing alarm. Thank you for this opportunity to present my findings, I began, my voice steady and professional. Over the weekend, I conducted an exhaustive analysis of our company's financial efficiency, focusing specifically on identifying and eliminating internal profit drains that have cost us nearly $2 million over the past 24 months. The first slide appeared, a timeline showing major client payments alongside employee terminations, each data point meticulously documented with dates, amounts, and account transfer records. I watched Cornelius's face as he realized what was happening. The color drained from his skin as he understood that his demand for a public presentation, recorded for company archives, was about to become the evidence of his own destruction. As you can see, I continued, advancing to the next slide, there's a remarkable pattern of correlation between large client payments and sudden employee performance issues leading to termination. The statistical probability of this occurring naturally is approximately 0.003%. Ophelia tried to interrupt, standing up with some manufactured concern about presentation protocols, but CEO Harrison Blackthorne gestured for her to sit down. His attention was completely focused on the screen, and I could see the exact moment comprehension dawned in his eyes. The next slide detailed the account transfers, complete with routing numbers, timestamps, and the secondary account information that Cornelius had been so careful to hide. I'd spent Sunday afternoon tracing every transaction, building an evidence chain that would make prosecutors weep with joy. The beauty of this fraud scheme, I explained, advancing through slides that showed Cornelius's methodology with clinical precision, lies in its psychological manipulation. Employees are made to believe they've failed professionally, when in reality, they've been selected as convenient scapegoats to justify termination and prevent discovery of embezzlement. Cornelius was no longer trying to hide his panic. He kept glancing at the recording equipment, knowing that every word was being preserved for the legal proceedings that would inevitably follow. The room had fallen into absolute silence except for my voice methodically dismantling 2 years of carefully constructed theft. I showed them the client communications that proved deliverables had been completed on time, the altered performance reviews that Ophelia had backdated, the systematic pattern of selecting employees right after major payments arrived. 7 employees terminated under identical circumstances, I continued, each one coinciding with the mysterious disappearance of client funds ranging from $120,000 to $315,000. CFO Patricia Wyndham was frantically taking notes, already calculating the scope of the wrongful termination lawsuits, the criminal charges, the reputational damage. I could see her mental math adding up the cost of Cornelius's little operation. But I wasn't finished. The final section of my presentation detailed something that made even my blood run cold when I'd discovered it. Cornelius had been preparing to scale up. His weekend assignment to me wasn't just about covering another theft. It was about positioning me as the scapegoat for his biggest score yet. The Meridian Industries contract, worth $4.7 million, was scheduled to pay out Tuesday morning. Cornelius had planned to pin that entire amount on my failure to deliver the weekend market analysis, terminate me Monday afternoon, and disappear with enough money to retire comfortably. Instead, he was sitting in a conference room full of witnesses, watching his entire operation get methodically exposed in his own words, using his own presentation format, recorded for posterity. The psychological warfare he'd perfected against his victims was now being turned on him with surgical precision. Every detail he'd thought was hidden was being displayed for his colleagues, his superiors, and soon, law enforcement. I concluded with a slide that showed the total financial impact, not just the stolen funds, but the cost of replacing 7 talented employees, the potential lawsuits, the criminal liability, and the reputational damage to the company. My recommendation, I said, looking directly at Cornelius as his world collapsed around him, is immediate implementation of fraud prevention protocols, forensic accounting review, and coordination with law enforcement to recover stolen assets and prevent future theft. The silence that followed was beautiful. Harrison Blackthorne broke the silence first, his voice carrying the weight of someone who just realized his company had been systematically pillaged under his nose. Cornelius, I need you and Ophelia to remain here while we contact our legal department and external auditors. But what happened next exceeded even my wildest expectations of how thoroughly someone could destroy themselves through their own arrogance. Cornelius, instead of staying quiet or attempting damage control, made the fatal mistake of doubling down. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, pointing at me with trembling fingers. "You're taking the word of someone who couldn't even complete a simple weekend assignment? Zelara clearly fabricated these documents to cover her own incompetence." The executives exchanged glances that could have cut glass. He was still trying to run his original playbook, even with the evidence of his crimes displayed on the wall behind him. "Actually," I replied, pulling out my phone with deliberate calm, "everything I've presented came directly from your own computer files and company servers. I documented every access point, every timestamp, every source. Would you like me to walk through exactly which folders contained the evidence?" Ophelia finally spoke up, her voice carrying an edge of desperation. "This presentation violates confidentiality protocols. Zelara accessed sensitive financial information without authorization. Authorization that was explicitly granted when Cornelius assigned me to analyze company efficiency." I responded smoothly. "In fact, he insisted I use any resources necessary to complete the analysis. I have his written instructions right here." I displayed the email thread where Cornelius had authorized my access to financial systems, practically demanding I dig deep into company operations to complete his impossible weekend assignment. His own words were now the legal foundation for everything I'd uncovered. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. He'd given me the keys to discover his crimes, then demanded I present my findings publicly. CFO Patricia Wyndham leaned forward, her expression grim. "Cornelius, I need direct access to the secondary account information shown in this presentation. Immediately." "I don't know what account she's referring to," he lied, but his voice cracked on the words. "Account number 7841293655577 at Hartwell Regional Bank," I recited from memory. "Opened 18 months ago with your social security number and personal identification. Current balance approximately $1.8 million based on Friday's transfers." The room erupted into controlled chaos as executives began making urgent phone calls. Legal department, forensic accountants, law enforcement, the board of directors. Everyone suddenly had urgent calls to make, except Cornelius and Ophelia, who were trapped in their seats like specimens under a microscope. But the most satisfying moment was still coming. Patricia Wyndham ended her call with the bank and looked directly at Cornelius. The account has been frozen pending investigation. Security footage from the bank shows you making deposits that correspond exactly with the dates in Zelara's presentation. That's when Cornelius finally understood the complete scope of his destruction. It wasn't just the theft he'd been caught for. It was the systematic conspiracy he'd built with his wife, the 7 innocent people whose careers he'd demolished, the millions in potential lawsuits, and the criminal charges that would follow him for the rest of his life. Ophelia made one last desperate play. This is clearly a setup. Zelara has been planning this attack for months, probably collaborating with disgruntled former employees. Actually, I said, accessing another file on my laptop, let me show you something else I discovered during my research. The new slide displayed email correspondence between Cornelius and Ophelia from before she was officially hired, detailing their plan to systematically remove senior employees and replace them with Ophelia's relatives and friends. My termination was meant to clear the way for Ophelia's sister Genevieve to take my position, continuing a pattern they'd established across multiple departments. 7 terminated employees, I continued. 7 new hires, all personally connected to Ophelia. The nepotism alone would be grounds for investigation, but combined with the embezzlement, it paints a picture of comprehensive corporate fraud. Harrison Blackthorne stood up, his decision clearly made. Security, please escort Cornelius and Ophelia to separate offices. They're not to communicate with each other or access any company systems. Legal will coordinate with law enforcement for the formal arrest process. As security arrived, something shifted in Cornelius's demeanor. The panicked denial disappeared, replaced by a cold rage directed entirely at me. You think you're clever, don't you? You have no idea what you've done. There are consequences for interfering in business that doesn't concern you. Cornelius, Harrison warned, I strongly advise you to stop talking. But Cornelius was beyond rational thought. She's destroyed everything. 2 years of careful planning, millions in secured funds, a perfect system that hurt nobody. Nobody? I stood up, my voice carrying 2 years of suppressed fury. Jennifer Ashworth had a nervous breakdown after you fired her. She thought she was incompetent, that she'd failed at everything. Bradley Quinton is still unemployed because you destroyed his professional reputation. 7 people internalized the failure you manufactured, believing they weren't good enough, when the only thing they'd done wrong was be in your way when you needed scapegoats. The psychological damage hit him harder than any legal consequence could. He'd spent 2 years believing his victims deserved their fate, that he was simply a superior strategist, outmaneuvering inferior competitors. Facing the reality that he'd destroyed innocent people for money was clearly something he'd never allowed himself to consider. As security led them away, Ophelia shot me a look of pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, I replied calmly. It absolutely is. The conference room emptied except for Harrison, Patricia, and myself. They had immediate damage control to coordinate, legal strategies to develop, and a comprehensive audit to arrange. But before diving into crisis management, Harrison turned to me with an expression I'd never seen from senior leadership before. Respect. Zelara, what you've done here today saved this company from complete financial collapse. The Meridian payment alone would have bankrupted us when the fraud was eventually discovered. Your weekend work prevented a catastrophe. There's more, I said quietly. The secondary account wasn't Cornelius's only hiding place. I found evidence of offshore accounts, shell companies, and a network that extends beyond our organization. This was never going to stop with 7 employees or $2 million. Patricia's phone rang immediately. She glanced at the caller ID and paled. It's Meridian Industries. They're probably calling about payment scheduling. Answer it, Harrison said grimly. We need to start the disclosure process immediately. As Patricia took the call, explaining that we'd discovered internal fraud that might have affected their account, I realized something profound had shifted in my professional identity. I was no longer the employee desperately trying to survive impossible deadlines and manufactured failures. I'd become someone who could dismantle elaborate criminal conspiracies using nothing but determination and analytical thinking. The immediate aftermath unfolded with devastating efficiency. Law enforcement arrived within an hour, armed with the evidence I'd compiled over the weekend. Forensic accountants swarmed the financial systems, finding additional evidence I'd missed in my initial analysis. The 7 terminated employees were contacted and offered not just reinstatement, but compensation for the professional damage they'd endured. But the most satisfying moment came 3 hours later, when I received a text message from Jennifer Ashworth. Someone had reached out to her about the investigation, and she'd called to thank me personally. "I've spent months thinking I was a failure," her voice said through my phone's speaker, "wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't perform at the level I thought I was capable of. You've given me back my confidence, my professional identity. I don't know how to thank you." 7 similar calls followed over the next 2 days. 7 people whose careers and self-worth had been deliberately demolished were discovering that their failures had been manufactured by criminals, not personal inadequacy. The legal proceedings moved with unusual speed. The evidence was so comprehensive, so meticulously documented, that Cornelius's legal team advised immediate plea negotiations rather than trial. The offshore accounts I discovered led to federal charges, turning a corporate embezzlement case into international financial crimes. Ophelia tried to claim ignorance, insisting she'd been manipulated by her husband, but the email evidence showed her as an equal partner in planning and executing the fraud. Her attempt to hire family members into terminated employees' positions demonstrated clear premeditation and conspiracy. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Cornelius Thatcher receive a 15-year sentence for financial crimes, conspiracy, and racketeering. Ophelia received 12 years for her role in the conspiracy. The stolen funds were recovered and returned to the company, plus penalties that funded a substantial expansion. But the most profound change was personal. Harrison Blackthorne offered me Cornelius's position as department head, with a salary triple what I'd been earning and complete autonomy over departmental operations. The weekend that was supposed to destroy my career had instead elevated me beyond anything I'd previously imagined possible. The 7 former employees all received substantial settlements and job offers, either returning to our company in senior positions or leveraging their experience into better opportunities elsewhere. Jennifer Ashworth was promoted to senior analyst. Bradley Quinton became our new client relations director. We'd all learned something crucial about the difference between actual failure and manufactured destruction. Real professional challenges create growth opportunities and learning experiences. Artificial failures, designed to serve someone else's criminal agenda, create only psychological damage and self-doubt. Looking back, I understand now that Cornelius's greatest mistake wasn't just the embezzlement or the systematic fraud. It was believing that intelligent, capable people would simply accept failure without questioning the circumstances that created it. He counted on his victims internalizing blame, never investigating whether their failures were legitimate or manufactured. He assumed that professional desperation would override analytical thinking, that people would be too focused on survival to examine the patterns around them. Instead, he encountered someone who responded to impossible deadlines not with panic, but with curiosity about why those deadlines existed in the first place. The weekend assignment that was meant to be my professional execution became the foundation for exposing the most elaborate corporate fraud scheme in our state's history. The presentation format he demanded for my public humiliation became the vehicle for his comprehensive destruction. Sometimes the most beautiful revenge comes not from planning elaborate schemes, but from simply refusing to accept injustice as inevitable and using your analytical skills to understand why injustice exists. Today, I run the department that Cornelius used to control, implementing systems that protect employees from the kind of systematic abuse he perfected. Every impossible deadline gets questioned. Every sudden performance issue gets investigated. Every termination gets thoroughly reviewed. But most importantly, I've learned to trust that when something feels fundamentally wrong about a professional situation, investigation usually reveals why. The instincts that told me Cornelius's weekend assignment was more than just poor management were absolutely correct. Now I need to hear from you. Have you ever faced an impossible workplace situation that felt designed to make you fail? Did you investigate the circumstances? Or did you internalize the failure as personal inadequacy? Drop your experiences in the comments below, because understanding these patterns helps protect everyone from workplace predators like Cornelius Thatcher. And if this story opened your eyes to red flags you might have missed in your own professional life, please hit that like button and share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding how workplace sabotage actually operates. Subscribe and ring that notification bell because I have more stories about turning professional disasters into unexpected victories. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when people decide to fight back against systematic injustice instead of accepting it as inevitable.